Hi, everyone, wherever you are around this world. I have got dear Fluffy with me tonight. Chocolate was here, is now turning into a game like Fluffy used to remember, and now Fluffy hangs around more. But Chocolate will probably come around and we'll see him throughout the show. But as I'm holding Fluffy and he is so relaxed, I wanted to share with you because Brad and I both had the same reaction tonight. We were editing and we both almost said at the same time, blue sky. And what that meant was we haven't been seeing blue sky in Albuquerque, New Mexico for about 3 weeks because of all the tragic and terrible fires on the West Coast. And there was something about this afternoon seeing the sky blue again with white puffy clouds. It was like, I've really missed this. Like there is some connection to Earth, a healthy Earth, in a blue sky with white puffy clouds. And seeing that today, it's like maybe there's still hope for our dear planet. And I'm gonna let Fluffy down and you can play and bring Chocolate because there's a lot of important news. There is so much news that I probably could have done an hour just on headlines. But I'm going to start tonight on what happened yesterday, Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. This depressing headline was announced around the world. Quote, U.S. reaches staggering milestone, 200,000 COVID-19 deaths, close quote. This day of September 23rd, 2020, as we went on the air, the number of American COVID deaths had gone up to 202,000 and 6.95 million cases. The United States has reported more COVID-19 deaths than anywhere else in the world, followed by Brazil and India, according to Johns Hopkins University. And across the Atlantic in England, Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that, quote, COVID-19 in the UK is spiking again in a second wave, close quote. As the daily cases in Great Britain rise sharply again with a 7-day average in September nearing 4,000. The Prime Minister described COVID-19 as, quote, the single biggest crisis the world has faced in my lifetime, close quote. To get through the fall and winter, the Prime Minister has ordered new COVID-19 restrictions, including earlier closing times for pubs, bars, and restaurants. And in the United States, at a stem cell laboratory at the University of California in San Francisco, affiliated Gladstone Institute, the lab director, Dr. Todd McDevitt, showed Yahoo News this microscope image where the blue is where the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus caused long fibers to break apart into small pieces of this muscle in a heart. This is heart muscle. And the COVID created a hole in the heart muscle shown by the blue. Dr. McDevitt said the heart damage caused by the COVID coronavirus he is studying, quote, could be a warning sign for a potential wave of future heart disease in COVID survivors. He said, I am more scared today of contracting the virus by far than I was 4 months ago, close quote, Dr. McDevitt. Further, the August 20th issue of the Lancet Journal stated, quote, we report the case of an 11-year-old child with multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children related to COVID-19, who developed cardiac failure and died after 1 day of admission to hospital for treatment, close quote. What causes a second wave? First, COVID-19 is airborne. And lab tests have shown that a human coughing, like me now, would go all the way to the camera lens and further, at least 16 feet, potentially infecting any person who walks in that air. Infections will continue to grow as long as the average number of people infected by each infectious person is greater than 1. That's why masks can help prevent disease spread. Right now, at least 90% of the American population has not had COVID. So they have no immunity to getting the disease, and without a vaccine or strict social distancing, that 200,000 death figure will continue to rise, along with increasing cases in a second wave, because there is no widespread immunity to COVID-19. While the microscopic coronavirus has been changing human lives everywhere in 2020, other forces are at work on grand scales that could change the human future on Earth for centuries ahead. Headline: Dismay as huge chunk of Greenland's ice cap breaks off. Dateline September 14, 2020, Associated Press. The glacier section that broke off was 42.3 square miles at the end of the northeast Greenland ice stream that flows off the land into the ocean. Scientists expressed alarm about the persistent disintegration of the Arctic's largest remaining ice shelf that continues to lose more ice each year than is added by the snow. In fact, the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of our world. A recent NASA study reports that, quote, melting from ice shelves in Greenland and Antarctica, this is the Getz ice shelf here, will contribute over 15 inches to global sea level rise by 2100, close quote. The Arctic and Antarctic ice are melting because temperatures are getting warmer. People were tweeting on September 14th, only 9 days ago, that France recorded its hottest national September day on record at 33.4 degrees Celsius, which is 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And one hot spot in Orvay, France, reached 37.9 degrees Celsius. That is 125.82 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 230 monthly station records were broken in France, some going back nearly 150 years. Climate scientists now project the global average Earth temperature to be as much as 0.75 degrees Celsius higher in 2020 than it was in 1980, only 40 years before. NOAA reports that, quote, 9 of the 10 hottest years on record have happened during this 21st century, close quote. And in the United States, a month ago on August 17, 2020, Death Valley, California registered the hottest temperature recorded since 1931 temperature records began being kept, 54.4 degrees Celsius, which is almost 130 degrees Fahrenheit. As the Earth's surface keeps changing ever more rapidly, there is another breakthrough waiting in the wings, and has been for thousands of years. Other intelligences that share this planet, the moon, our solar system, and beyond are real. The American Pentagon knows it. Russia knows it. China knows it. Brazil knows it. And now the Prime Minister of Japan is signaling that he knows it too. Oddly, without explanation, on September 14, 2020, the Japan Times reported that Japan's Defense Minister Taro Kono, quote, has issued standing orders to teach his self-defense forces about how to deal with unidentified aerial objects that could pose a threat to Japan's security, close quote. This was an odd turnaround, since back in April 2020, only a few months ago, Defense Minister Kono said he did not believe in UFOs. After the American Pentagon released more Navy UFO videos taken in 2004 and 2015 that show unidentified aerial objects moving at speeds and doing maneuvers that human pilots cannot do. So what changed Defense Minister Kono's mind in the past 6 months? Whatever is disturbing him, his new protocol for his self-defense forces is, quote, to have rules in place in the event that SDF members encounter unconventional aircraft, including ever-advancing drone technology that could pose a national security threat to Japan, close quote. Well, it is nice to see Japan, the United States, and a few other nations around the world now beginning to acknowledge unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, which are the same technologies as unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, that have been reported since World War II. But over the past 70 years, many of our fellow human beings not only have seen UFOs, but they have been taken aboard for physical examinations, extraction of sperm, extraction of eggs, and occasionally are shown control panels that usually have symbols the abductee or experiencer does not recognize. A rare few have described what looked like a control panel for the craft, sometimes labeled with symbols, sometimes that have imprints of hands, sometimes 6 fingers or other, that imply that there is control through the fingers from whatever brain or consciousness is in control of the craft. About a month ago, I received a 6-page, single-lined email from a man who is now 68 years old. He was a police officer in Kansas from age 21 in 1973 until his retirement from police work on his 44th birthday in 1996 after 23 years on the force. During all that time, what never left his mind was what happened to him in Kansas when he was 14 years old, right before high school started. In his email, he wrote, quote, I have some very important information I need to tell before it's too late for me. I'm in pretty poor health now. I'm not sick, but I cannot stand or walk very long because of back pain, and I think that my heart is getting weak from sitting too much. It is a personal experience, and I have never even told my family because it is too incredible to be believed. But you will know it's true. I don't want my name given out, but here is what happened.
Back in 1966, I was 14 years old. I had 2 real close friends. One was Steve. We'd been friends since the 3rd grade, just finished our 8th grade junior high, and it was just the day before high school started. Steve and I decided, since we'd been in Boy Scouts for several years and we'd been camping out a lot that year, we decided we'd do one last sleep out before school started. Across from Steve's house was a creek, and on the other side of the creek was a pasture, and we decided we'd just take our sleeping bags out there in the middle of this pasture and sleep out. So we lay our bags out, probably 5 feet apart, and we were looking straight east. I was talking at the time. I was in the middle of a sentence when all of a sudden this star goes to the left and goes past another star and stops. And Steve yells, hey, that star just crossed that other star. I said, yeah, I saw it. And all of a sudden the star goes straight up. Actually, it was coming towards us to the west, just zip, and it was there. And we know at this point that it's being controlled by someone, and we can't figure out what it is. The helicopter couldn't be as high as this was, couldn't go that fast. A plane couldn't go that fast and stop. And all of a sudden it dawns on me, it has gotten so much larger that it is a lot closer to us. I said to Steve, I don't know if we can make it to your house before it gets here. It is so fast. It moves over to the right and comes down even lower, and it's right between us and Steve's house. It knows what we're thinking. And if you compare the size of a star, this would be the size of a quarter at this point. It was that large and real bright. I'm not knowing if we should run or what. It stays there for a while. It takes off to the right and up. It gets smaller, disappears out of sight. And that took 2 seconds. And I laid back on my sleeping bag. Wow, that was close. That was really scary. And then I look over at Steve, and he's asleep. And I thought, well, that's weird. How can you sleep when something like that just happened? I called to him a couple times, no reaction. And for some reason, I look over my right shoulder behind me, and there's this large propane tank. I'd seen them in fields before. I'm wondering, how did this oblong, big old tank get there while we were laying there in the dark? It's a wonder we weren't run over. I look over at Steve again, and there are these 2 or 3 kids on the other side of him standing up, and another kid by his head. Kids hold their arm up, and Steve's bag is floating up into the air, and it's like his head was higher, and the bag was coming off of him. And I thought that was weird. He would slide out if his feet were higher. I thought, these are weird-looking kids, real creepy-looking.
What were you seeing?
They were skinny, long arms, long legs, and large heads. What I now know is the Greys. I realize we're in a bad situation, and I look back toward where this propane tank was, and the tank is no longer a propane tank or whatever I thought it was. It has a ramp down from one end of it. The propane tank itself looks translucent, like I can see shapes inside there, and there's a light coming out.
And so what you mean is what you thought was a white, oblong, tic-tac shaped propane tank is now becoming a completely different reality. You are seeing translucent through it, and you're associating these 3 small gray beings with that oblong craft.
That's correct. I realize now it's from outer space, people from some other world. I'm thinking, can I run away and not get caught? I looked over my left shoulder, and there was a man standing back behind me. He was wearing a black hat, a trench coat, some kind of suit, and for some reason, I just instantly thought he was a government man, like FBI, and I thought, that's crazy. He's got to be with these other people. I got really scared.
Are you okay?
I've never been so scared in my life. So I start yelling, take him, which is horrible, but take him, let me go. Please don't hurt me. And I hear the man say, calm down. It's all right. We're not going to hurt you. But I'm still screaming and yelling for help. I'm hoping that somebody will hear me to rescue us. But suddenly it dawns on me, I'm not making any sound. I don't think my mouth was even coming open. And I can hear him.
Like telepathy, like you are yelling in your mind, but you realize it's not going through your vocal cords in your throat.
That's correct. I thought I was screaming at the top of my lungs, but I suddenly realized I'm not making any sound at all. But I can hear this man saying, calm down, everything's all right, we're not going to hurt you. And I said, are you in my head? And he said, yes, telepathy. I don't know why, but it seemed like I calmed down at that point. When he said telepathy, It was like, I don't know if I'd even heard that word before, but I understood it. Oh, another thing about its translucent tank, it was a reddish color, a reddish translucence to it. And I said to this guy, it's like a sports model. And he said, yes, it was. He said, would you like to drive this? And I said, yes. Next thing I know, I'm inside of this room, and I'd say it was like about a 6 foot by 6 foot area. There was a man sitting at a small table, and I was standing right behind him, and on the table was a window. How can a window be on a table? And I know that we're looking out into space. We're already up in the air. The man I was with tells the man, he was the pilot, to get up so I can sit there. And I sit down in this chair in front of this window. On the table, there were these symbols. And I said, is this your writing? And he said, no, they're symbols. And they indicated what the buttons would do. I didn't realize that the symbols themselves were buttons. They were like flat touchpad buttons. In 1966, we didn't have anything like that. The next thing I realized that there's this lever, and I said, what's this? And he said, that's called a joystick. He said, the faster and farther you push it away from you, the faster the ship would go. Also, the pilot had this little black beanie cap on. When he got up, it was still hanging above him. But when I sat down, the man that was taking care of me, he started putting that on my head. He was complaining about my hair being so thick, and he was rubbing spots on my head with his finger. He finally got the beanie cap to fit on my head right, and he said all I had to do was look in the window, look where I wanted to go, then push the joystick ahead. I would go to that spot, something out of this black sky to go into, and I pushed the joystick a little bit ahead. I just was afraid to speed up or something. I don't know. At one point, he reaches over and pushes the stick forward.
What was the little black beanie for?
As far as I know now, like the spot I was supposed to pick to go to, I guess it transmitted my thought to whatever controlled the ship to go where I wanted it to go, where I was looking at.
So inside of this UFO in 1966, right before high school at age 14, you are taken into the sports model version of the UFO, as the man in black said, and they show you flat buttons that have symbols on them, a joystick that the man in black describes as if you push it forward, you will go fast toward whatever it is you're concentrating on in what you thought was a window, and that all of your thoughts are going to be going through this black beanie that they've put on your head so that you are thinking the controls of this UFO.
Correct, yes. And I had always wondered how a window was on a table, not on a wall. And it was only in the last few months that somehow it dawned on me it was just a flat-screen monitor. We didn't have flat-screen monitors in 1966, and to see something so thin just sitting up on a table showing the outside seems so obvious now. It took me a long time to realize that.
So this was happening about 30 years before the Earth started seeing what would become computer screens and cell phones and all of that, which didn't happen until the 1990s.
Yes. And even when computers first came out, we didn't have flat screens. That was a few years after that, at least. And when I put my hand on this joystick, it felt so good in my hand. It was like it was made exactly to fit my hand. He pushed the joystick forward so we'd get to the spot I was supposed to go to. And this thing, it was just go, and there was no sensation. I didn't enjoy it. And suddenly I'm standing up behind the guy, the pilot. He's back in his chair again.
Was the man in black that you saw on the ground still in a black hat and a black suit in the UFO?
What I thought was a government man in a black hat, black trench coat, and black suit, I realized it was an illusion. I was simply seeing what he wanted me to think I was seeing. And once we got into the spaceship, he was just a gray. Years later, I started hearing about men in black showing up. That was just the aliens themselves making these people think they were government agents.
So at age 14, when you got on the ship, you were looking at a being that was very close to the image that you sent me as an illustration of the gray type that the man in black actually was when you got inside of the UFO?
That's correct. It was one of the grays.
Did the pilot look like the gray that was originally the man in black illusion?
He looked of the same species or race.
Were those little kid-like beings around there too?
No, I didn't see anybody but us in this one room. The gray man points to another screen to our left and uses the joystick he told me to watch. He maneuvers so we're looking at the Earth.
I hope you will all tune in next week for John Smith's question to that gray being that was pretending to be a man in black. And now, Peggy, what questions and comments do we have tonight?
Hi, Linda. First, I'd like to say thank you to all the super chats tonight. So thank you, Moonbird, Jamie Morix, Amy Kelly, happy birthday, Jeffrey Rizzo, Dolores Graff, Jacqueline Market, Rachel Sobek, Old School Shinobi, and NC Genie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that Moonbird and some of those names I'm beginning to recognize, and my hat off to you for being here and for your support, and I love all of you. And I'm very interested in what your questions and comments are.
The first question is regarding others who are here on the planet Earth, and they wondered what percentage of others do you think are here to actually help or experiment or control based on everything that you've seen?
The first thing in my head is I don't know enough. And the second thing came was I have been exposed to what is supposed to be a statistic by the Central Intelligence Agency, working with the National Security Agency, working with the Defense Intelligence Agency, working with Geospatial. And I think there are 13 other agencies beyond those four, that they work, or at least some people have said that there is a working statistic now on planet Earth that 30% of the surface population of our planet might be in the hybrid category. But when you talk with geneticists, they don't have knowledge. So I think that part of the problem is that talking about hybrids, talking about abductions, talking about advanced technologies from other places in the universe, it is still so sensitive because we are on a planet where truth about our existence in a universe that is teeming with consciousness and other life has been denied us, the Homo sapiens sapiens species. So the biggest game in town is how do you keep advancing the technology, whether it's in weaponry, communication, jumping portals, time travel, all of it. There's accelerated research in all of those subjects right now. I know that for a fact. How do you keep doing it without ultimately at some point having to bring in the billions of humans who deserve to know what these elites are doing in terms of advanced extraterrestrial technology development that is getting us out into the Milky Way galaxy and beyond, and that's not science fiction, that's real. But it's as if it's taking place as a total separate timeline from humanity struggling with an unstable planet that is going to be increasingly unstable in terms of climate, and that if volcanism gets added to it in the next 50, 60 years, life on the surface of this planet may be almost incomprehensibly rough. So there's a lot of motivating factors now in which there may be actually positive reasons for there to be collaboration with extraterrestrial biological entities that may be hybrids, percentages working with agencies on our planet now. But because the general public is still not supposed to know, it's schizophrenic, it's fractured, there are still classified subjects, there's still threats to lives. And everything I do, everything I've wanted to do is to get to a point where the whole planet is told the same truths. And I think that that is the general bond that all of you and I share is, and I hope that our Earthfiles group around the Earth continues to grow in leaps and bounds. Who knows, maybe by New Year's 2021, we can have another champagne celebration at 200,000 and maybe even celebrate that there is a vaccine close or on the horizon or maybe ready, and we could get past COVID as the terrible threat that it is. And that the next huge revolution, I hope, is going to be finally cracking it all open. And how they're going to do that officially, I think that's the stumbling block. They've been trying with the video of the Navy pilots. Pilots are saying that they are watching maneuvers that cannot be done by humans. They tread up to the words about extraterrestrial biological entities. They're now more comfortable calling it unidentified aerial phenomena than UFOs, but they're exactly the same. So this is at a betwixt and between moment on Earth at so many levels, politically, medically, scientifically, historically, archaeologically, and other life in the universe. In one way, it's exciting, but it's painful in having to slug through this revolutionary time when nothing is resolved, nothing is clear, and governments in every direction are not telling their citizens the truth, even about the most fundamental thing of a horrible, threatening COVID coronavirus. So, hybrids, whatever the percentage, I personally think it's a personal opinion. I think there are hybrids. And I think that there are a lot of intelligences living beneath the surface of this planet. I've talked about that for 3 years, going back to the DIA analyst who gave me quite an education for 7 hours in December of 1999. And he started with this geophysical lesson to me about looking at the Earth as spherical geometry and the fact that you could have 3 or 4 competing extraterrestrial civilizations living in completely different parts of planet Earth, a planet big enough to accommodate surface life with all kinds of other lives that know how to go at various places in mountains, under seas, underground. And all of this boils down to we're on a planet and which we think human civilization is complex. Well, it appears we are in a universe that is mind-numbingly complex. But that's part of the intrigue. So let's go to another question.
A viewer would like to know, is there really a yellow book? And if so, have you ever had credible conversations about it with your contacts?
The first time I heard about the yellow book of the alleged Greys was 1983. And that tied into my investigation having to do with having signed the contract in New York at Home Box Office to produce an hour called UFOs, the ET Factor. And that at the inception of that contract, I had had that dinner with Peter Gersten, the attorney for Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, who was in communication with the AFOSI agent Richard Doty in Albuquerque. Peter Gersten arranged for a meeting. I had the meeting in Kirtland at the AFOSI office, where I was at first introduced through a briefing paper for the President of the United States about extraterrestrials, various projects such as Sigma and Aquarius and Garnet, all having to do with the investigation of various aspects of extraterrestrials on Earth. And it was in that year, in that investigation, in Washington, D.C., and in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, there's a large section in which I use the name Sherman. And Sherman was the name in which I brought together two different government/military sources. And both of them had knowledge about the Yellow Book. When I think back, in 1983, iPads were something coming in the last half of the 1990s. But in 1983, there was no technology on the Earth that envisioned something that was about like this, that would glow, that was called the Yellow Book because allegedly the letters, the symbols glowed yellow on a background. That was why it was called the Yellow Book. It was compared later on that the iPad is one form of Yellow Book technology. But there is another aspect to it, as I understand it from both of those men that I called Sherman. Not flat screen looking at glowing letters, but that the technology that amazed them was the projection of holograms, three-dimensional, from the way they described it. I personally have never held this, so I am only sharing with you as they have told me. But my understanding is about this high, about this long, about this thick, something like 35 millimeter pull-out cameras were, with a round spherical crystal in the center, solid black and just a round circular. But that if you know what you're doing, that you can hold this in its fingers, again, like in the ET, in the control rooms, the hands going down into the panels, touching the symbols that activate the craft. That if you know what you're doing, you can activate, and this was the phrase I've never forgotten, this technology captures time and plays it back in holograms. And I remember between the Yellow Book and that description that it was very clear that the extraterrestrials that the governments were, or government was collaborating with, communicating with, had some of this technology to back engineer, that it all had to do with some kind of light. Light through the Yellow Book or glow, and then time being played back in the way it was described to me is projections of holograms about so. And I remember that later on having a joke with somebody about these technologies that the ETs used that were like Princess Leia in the Star Wars movies. And I remember somebody saying, well, it isn't really Hollywood. That's Hollywood based on something we know really exists being inserted into that movie. So when you talk about the Yellow Book, there may be that the government uses that phrase for just the one flat technology with the glowing yellow letters. But there is, as far as I know, because I've heard this described by people who have had interaction with this technology, and they say it's holograms, and they have seen historic scenes. And one statement that was made to me back in the early 80s was, it's hard to imagine if this is true, but this was the statement. I haven't forgotten. I have a bit of a flypaper mind, that things stick. And it was, in the holographic technology that the praying mantises oversee as the overseers of planetary systems and the seeding and evolution of life, that the entire age or the entire drama of the creation of this particular solar system is supposed to be in one of these holographic archives, and that 4.6 billion years of the evolution of this solar system and everything that's happened on this planet and Mars and throughout is all recorded. And to the human mind, this seems almost overwhelming and astonishing. But once you have talked with enough people who have served in some various facets of science, military, government, and they've been exposed to various pieces of the mysteries of the ET technology, or they know it does X, Y, and Z, you become convinced that when a physicist told me in 2014 that we are dealing with trying to back engineer technology that we don't have any even concepts for. It may be that stuck down under Area 51 at Edwards Air Force, China Lake, Wright-Patterson, Eglin, around the country, and all of the various sensitive underground. They may have a wide variety of which they have successfully back engineered with the help of, let's say, collaborative grays that we don't know if they're friends, neutral, or what, but at least collaborative grays, that they may progress. And then apparently there are other technologies that are like in a museum. And this one man said, they may be thousands of years ahead. We don't know even what we've got. So there's a wide range, and the Yellow Book is one of those technologies that is defined as a communication technology that glows, that I think is different from the projected three-dimensional hologram, or they are related. So Yellow Book, extraterrestrial technology used to communicate in images, pictures, and light. Okay, what else have we got today?
A viewer would like some clarification on animal mutilations. They'd like to know, when they say bloodless, is there no blood in the animal body, or has the blood been removed from the animal, or is it just around the body?
Excellent questions. I have tried to address that for 41 years. You will find all of this addressed in my first book, An Alien Harvest. In my second book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, huge chapter on animal mutilations with pathology, showing cooked collagen, showing cooked hemoglobin, showing dozens and dozens and dozens of photographs, and talking about this issue that all the many necropsies that I've been involved in, working with Dr. John Altschuler in Denver for about a decade, and we would have still been working together, but he was hit by a bicycle, on a bicycle from behind, and was killed in Denver in the 90s. Tragic. But we had amassed a growing body of information. And here I'm going to try to give you through his lens as he talked to me about this. In my books, you will see photographs where the definition is defined by him, where you're looking at under a microscope of cooked hemoglobin, cooked collagen. That's not autolysis. Autolysis is a word that is thrown around, meaning that when your human body or an animal body dies and chemistry begins to break down, there will be a rise in body temperature a little bit as there is this chemistry. But it is nowhere in the category of cooking hemoglobin and cooking collagen. And why are they important? When Dr. Altschuler had asked me if I would go out into pastures where there were mutilated animals, take formalin solution, which is not as hardening on tissue as formaldehyde is. Formaldehyde makes tissue very tough. And what he needed was to be able to have it preserved in time to get back to his lab, to go to a lab to prepare for the thin slices that go into slides that you can look at in a microscope. And I did that maybe on 20, 30 animals for him. Going out into the field, getting it in formalin, taken it to the lab, getting the tissue sliced, prepared in microscopes as fast as we could while it was fresh. And he noticed several things right from the very beginning of our first discussions, that if you're in the field and you're at an actual animal mutilation of what I've reported so much about for 41 years, you can feel the edge of a mutilator's cut, and it will feel like plastic. It's hardened, and it's usually darkened, versus you can do this for yourself. You can go to any Department of Agriculture in any state and ask for a booklet on predator kills, and you will see what natural predator kills look like. And animal mutilations are in this category. Natural kills are in that category. They don't resemble each other in any way. And Dr. Altschuler was puzzled about that brown plastic feeling. So right from the very beginning, one of the first things we established was that the hemoglobin and the collagen were both cooked at these excisions. Now, why is this important to this question about, is blood drained? Is that why there is no blood? If the blood were drained from the muscle tissue of a cow, a horse, a pig, a goat, a sheep, a reindeer, on and on to all the ones that have been mutilated, you would not be seeing pink, red muscle. Pause for a minute, have your mind go into a supermarket. Imagine you're going to the meat department. If the hemoglobin had been extracted from the meat, instead of looking at pink, red, you would be seeing white or pale pink. In the animal mutilations, 99% of the time, there is a 1% in which I have seen white tissue, but 99% of the time, the muscle tissue coming down to the hard plastic feeling of the cut is pink. That means that there is hemoglobin in the muscle tissue and in the arteries. To have it all gone, all the hemoglobin, you would have to have a way to extract the hemoglobin molecules out from the veins and the arteries. And that is not the case either. So, right from the very beginning, working with Dr. Altschuler, the first thing that he was able to document, and it then made sense to me, is that there is a technology that is cooking wherever the excision is, ear, eye, jaw, tongue. Tongue is always removed deep in the throat. You have to open up to see. Sometimes trachea are removed. Sometimes kidneys and bladders are removed, but all of this you find on necropsy, no surgical excisions on the surface of the body. Genitals, male and female, rectum, probably 90% of animal mutilation cases that I'm aware of, for reasons unknown, rectal tissue, cored out, 6-8 inches wide. I would say in the measurements that I have gotten from law enforcement, there's been kind of an average depth into the bodies of the large animals of about 12 to 14 inches. Everything is removed in that. Vaginal, I would say, and I don't even know if I remember a case of a female cow in which the vaginal tissue was not removed. They are bloodless because the collagen, the hemoglobin have been cooked. So there's no, you can have liquid blood on the other side of the cooked area of the excision. You might be able to take something and cut into the body of the animal right after death, and there might be blood flow there, but there's not going to be blood flow where the heat has been applied at the excisions. That's why they remain bloodless. Now here is another mystery that bothered Dr. Altschuler. He had me come to the lab one day, and he had a microscope set up so you could look at one case here and one case here for comparison. So he had me look on the right side, and he said, just look on the right. That's gynecological tissue that I've gotten from the University of Colorado Medical Center, known, doctors known, instrument is known, temperature is known, everything is known. So look at this. This is laser. Here's the animal mutilation. Look at that. Linda, tell me what you see is different. And the first thing that hit me in the gynecological surgery laser was black specks. It was like a little bit like pepper had been along the edges of what you would assume is the excision line with the laser. But in the animal mutilation, looking down into that microscope, that's the one thing I didn't see. And I just said to him, well, this one has black specks, this one doesn't. He said, that's right. He said, I don't understand this. He said, all Earth life is carbon-based. You take a hot laser in any kind of what would be known as a typical laser, and you cut tissue, you're going to be able to see carbon residue in terms of these little black grains in normal laser surgery. And he said, if the heat that causes the cooking of the collagen and the hemoglobin and that plasticized feeling of a lot of the excisions, if it isn't a laser, Linda, what is it? Because there's no carbon residue by the mutilator's technology. And I don't have any definitive answer on that to this day, except that if you jump over to the abductions, not many humans have ever, even in abduction experiences, I only know of probably 3 in which the abductions and the abductees are describing seeing a cow, in the 3 cases they were cows, being beamed up in a beam technology into a craft, and then they're somehow inside and they're watching. And so they have an introduction to a technology. They don't know what they're looking at. They see tubes, they see wires, they see different things, but they come away with a kind of general impression that 2 things are happening in the animal mutilations, 2 needs for the ETs. Sustenance for some, and genetic harvest of tissues to be applied to the creation of making other body containers. And so that's, right now, that's as much as I can say and help you understand that the bodies of mutilated animals are not white. They're not white muscle. That would be the evacuation of all hemoglobin. But they have edges, and that's why the blood isn't running out. And there are photos, you will find them throughout the last 70 years or so, where you will see the classic mutilation, jaw, ear, no blood from the eye, no blood from the jaw. But when you get to the belly or to the rectal area, you might then be looking at, let's say, a circular area or a U-shaped area, and it's not running blood, but there appears to be blood on the surface of where the hide was removed. I don't have any definitive answer for why some cases it's not running blood, but it is definitely hemoglobin on the surface of where, let's say, the hide appears to have just been like something goes, like a cookie cutter, and then pulls that hide away. That's the one thing that I know can have surface blood, but it's still not running blood. So I would urge all of you, if you really want to get honest facts, the pressure of evidence, try to get An Alien Harvest and Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1. And they're 8.5 by 11 on really good paper because I wanted the photographs and the documents and the maps to be absolutely crystal clear, like you would be having photographs. And that's why my books are large and on that high quality paper, so they are really, really clear. And in this time where we've got horse mutilations continuing in France, we've got half cats that are popping up or were before the fires in the Northwest and maybe persisting in England. There are cattle mutilations still being reported in the Oregon area and other places. They're ongoing. This season, fires and climate changes and so many things with COVID way up here as sort of affecting all of us so much that there may be animal mutilations taking place in the bloodless category that I investigated and that are in my An Alien Harvest and Glimpses Volume 1. And we're not hearing about everything that is happening because news is so saturated with so many other pieces, and the mystery is never solved. And so media often just go like that on mysteries that are never solved. I think that the animal mutilations are what Sheriff Tex Graves told me in September of 1979. Linda, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space. But fully understanding why and putting it in the context of the Defense Intelligence Agency analyst in December of 1999 who said our government had proof that 3 competing extraterrestrial biological entity civilizations have been competing on this planet in this solar system for at least 270 million years, and they stay underground. So that means they come up to the surface for, and you can fill in the blanks. So it may be that it is cyclic because the need for whatever they are harvesting from the animal life on the surface comes in cycles for them. And then you start thinking of Earth as we're the surface life. The Black Project world of technology has big, huge operations not too far below the surface. And then there are other intelligences that have been cohabiting with surface life on this planet and throughout this solar system and on and on and on for at least 270 million years. And you began to get a completely different sense of the planet that we are trying to cohabit with, and that one of the explanations for why there have been so many UFOs drawn in paintings throughout the centuries is because they aren't going from here to 12 light years or 20 light years or 100 light years. They're just going up and down floors in planet Earth. And then there are the others that can move point to point through portals, and that's a whole different category. So on our planet, the more I learn, the more faceted our own planet and the geophysics of where we live on the surface begins to make more sense in relationship to what has been reported for centuries of craft in the sky that put beams down. They're not having to jump around the universe. They're just coming up elevators or something and taking off in our skies and then going back. I think there's a lot of that on planet Earth. And now the mystery is, how are we going to be introduced by the power brokers of Earth to the realization that we're in an already cohabited planet? It doesn't scare me. We live with it all the time. We've been living with it with millions of years. So I don't personally understand why we can't all be told the whole truth. And I've gone past by about 5 minutes, but I enjoyed your questions, and I hope you enjoyed this insight into John Smith, and that next week I will pick up with another fascinating part and see you all here, and maybe we can work our way through to another champagne party at the end of December and January. Keep the numbers growing. Tell everybody to come. I love you guys. See you next week.